Welcome to Artists at Work, World of Warcraft.
Hey everyone, hope you're having a great BlizzCon. My name is Jeff. I'm an art manager on World of Warcraft, and I'll be your host. For this panel, we're going to showcase some of the visual development workflow that artists on the team use when they're creating art for World of Warcraft. Specifically, they're going to be focusing on Torghast, Tower of the Damned, which is an upcoming feature for Shadowlands. So please keep in mind the work you're going to see is early and subject to change. So with that said, let's go ahead and introduce your artists so they can get started. Over here we have Cole. Cole, if you could tell everyone your name, how long you've been on the team, maybe some things you've made in the past, and then what you're going to be making for us today.
Yes, my name is Cole Eastburn. I've been on the team for about 11 and a half years. I'm a senior visual development artist on the World of Warcraft team. Some of the things I worked on in the past, I've worked on the art and wheel concept of the landscape of the forest. It's a bunch of stuff, the Valkyria crest, class crest that they have, the Mechagon crest that was out. So, what's stuff like that?
A few things in the gallery.
A couple things.
Okay. In the middle, we have Matt. Matt, if you could tell everyone your name, how long you've been on the team, what you've done in the past, and then what you're going to be making today for us.
Sure. My name is Matthew McEwen, and I'm a character artist on World of Warcraft. I've been on the team for about 3 years. Some things you might recognize that I've made is Lorthamar and Rexar. Recently, I have some stuff in the art gallery that if you want to take a look at that stuff, some of the mock creatures, some other things in Maldraxxus as well. And today, I'm going to be working on some Torghast boss sketches. So right now, I have some thumbnails here, and I'm going to be taking this last one here to a finish. Oh, they can't see. Okay.
Thanks, Matt. And last but not least, we have Eric. Eric, if you can tell everyone how long you've been on the team, what you've done in the past, and then what you're going to be working on today.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Eric Braddock. I am a 3D artist on the prop team for World of Warcraft. I've been on the team for about 6.5 years. And some of the kits over the years that I've worked on have been Garrisons, Paladin, Order Hall props, Death Knight Order Hall props, Pillars of the Creation, Vault of the Wardens, and more recently, Dalen Proudmoore statue, the Kulturas boats, and the Uther Lightbringer statue update. So. And today, I'm going to be working on a Book of the Dead prop, something that maybe like a caster would be holding, or a prop that you would see in Torghast, Tower of the Damned.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. So while the artists are started, I just want to let you guys know that we have Guillermo and Steve with microphones if you're joining us live. If you have any questions, go ahead and line up behind them, and we'll get to your questions. So, Cole, I mentioned at the beginning about visual development. Can you talk about what that means for the team and how that fits into the larger picture of creating art for WoW?
Yeah, so the visual development team, we're a pretty small group, but pretty important. We try to come up with like the style, the big picture items that drive the team's production forward. So like what's the overall look of a zone or a POI, which is a place of interest. So something like this concept that was done, and sometimes they're in color, sometimes they're in black and white, but it's meant to give the team like a mood or a feeling for an entire zone or a dungeon or something like that.
Awesome. Thanks, sir. Or thanks, Cole. So Matt, what are you starting out with?
So I'm going to be starting out with these thumbnails here. As I mentioned earlier, so this is some of the rougher stuff that I'm going to be taking from. So I'm going to go with this bottom one right here. So this is where I'm at with this currently. I'm going to be just refining some of this stuff and then bringing it more towards finish.
So how long are you spending on those thumbnails on the previous image?
Not too long, just to kind of get the ideas down. So they can be really rough, just a basic idea, and then you can kind of go make sure that it's the correct one to go with.
Okay. And are you kind of going over detail in one area, or are you just kind of hitting the whole image at once?
Oh, sure. Starting with just kind of the shoulder pad right now, just getting that a little bit more finished. But then I'll move around the whole thing.
Cool. Looking good.
Thanks.
So, Eric, where are you starting?
I like to start with some really loose sketches, thumbnails of maybe the shape or some of the elements that I'm going to have. I'm thinking about this tome, whether or not I want it to have, chains, really long kind of necrotic looking like bookmarks or skulls and crystals, things that kind of relate to the aesthetic of Torghast itself.
And you're specifically working on a prop asset. So when you come up with those, are you just kind of free-forming it off the top of your head, or do you look at reference? Do you do research? Like, how do you kind of dive into that?
So there's a couple of different things. You know, if I'm starting the kit, like depending on if there's nothing established yet on the team, a lot of it is just reference gathering, which, you know, jump on Google and look up images that fit this theme. So something like this would be skulls and, you know, metal and references to the Domination kit of, you know, the Lich King's armor and Frostmourne and things like that. But in this case, there was a lot of preliminary work from the VizDev team. And so I was pulling a lot of references from some of the work that they did and a little bit of my own kind of contribution to it.
To jump back and forth on that too is like, I just saw the Necromancer book that he's making, so I was gonna try and put, and this is something we do all the time, we'll bounce back and forth, so it's like, VizDev doesn't just do everything. Like maybe I'll add his book to the back of this guy, right?
Oh, that's cool. Okay, so you're working in his idea into your idea.
Yeah, maybe it's like a huge tome that Eric's got going on, probably a skull right here. That's what I think he was doing. And again, this is like the thumbnailing stage, so it's supposed to be pretty loose. It's Jimmy Lowe, my art lead, has a great way of thinking about your thumbnails, which is something I struggle with for a long time. I usually tend to do something a little bit more detailed, like this stuff, and I tend to jump into rendering because I like to do it so much. But for thumbnailing, it's not production efficient. So the way to think about thumbnailing that he told me is that think about kind of like how a kid would draw something, and like, so this would be Illidan. This would be my thumbnail for Illidan. And I think it's a great way to actually make sure that your character has something iconic. And if a kid can draw it, if you can show your drawing to a kid, and then he can actually draw it right after seeing it, and you actually see what the kid remembered from your drawing, or a person, just show a person, it's a good indication that you have a strong design.
That's awesome. That's really cool. It's a great way of thinking. So you said you tie in with Eric's. Do you do that often? Does your visual development team do that often, or?
Oh, all the time. One of the best parts about working on such a big team is that there is always a fresh idea. If you get stuck with artist block or anything like that, there's always someone there to be like, oh, what about this or what about that? And it helps you from getting into that rut.
That's awesome. It's looking great.
Hey, thank you.
So Matt, you're focusing on the braziers right now, and then.
Yep. So I'm just trying to go around the whole image basically, and start getting that more refined. So right now I'm on the bracer, moving on to the weapon.
Okay. When you design a character, do you design the weapon at the same time?
Sometimes we do. So if that character has a special weapon, like this character, for example, is kind of like a boss that might kind of be like the Grim Reaper. So like his weapon's very important in that sense. He's kind of like has a big scythe.
So when you're, do you work closely with design or art leads about this? How much detailed information do you get about the weapon specifically?
Sometimes it definitely varies. It could be something vague about the weapon. Maybe it's just the scythe. Maybe there's something more to it with the story. So we definitely want to incorporate story into our design if that's the case. But it really depends on what the character is.
Cool. If you guys have any questions and you're with us live, go ahead and line up behind Guillermo and Steve, and we'd love to answer those. One thing I noticed with your sketch, Eric, is you're working with more of a tone sort of gray.
Yeah, I like to work on some kind of background that has a value, just in case I want to jump in and play around with values at some point early on. Like, let's say I wanted to, you know, give this book some glowing kind of eyes here. It's easy to just throw some lighter value on there and get a better indicator of kind of like what that's going to look, what it's going to look like. And I'll worry about color as I get to that part, you know. But it gives me a good kind of, just like a good range to play with.
That's cool. Looks like we have a couple questions. Yeah.
This is a question for Eric as the 3D artist up here. So I know Blizzard allows some flexibility in this, but what's the general workflow like for prop creation for 3D for WoW?
The general what?
Workflow for
The
what
workflow.
programs, what
Well, we start like this with Photoshop, and depending, sketchbook even stuff just to generate some ideas. And going into a concept, either fully refined if you want to take it to that level, like a fully polished, almost borderline illustration kind of piece. Especially if it's like a hero piece, you want it to really nail down what the look is. And then you would jump into any 3D program like 3ds Max or Maya. I use 3ds Max. Our tools department we have a lot of really great tools that we run through 3ds Max. Some people like to go back and forth between Photoshop, 3D Coat, things like that, once you jump into actually texture painting. And we even do some of our own animation, like smaller animations and effects on our props, and we do all that right through 3ds Max.
Okay, yeah. All right. Thank you. And
Yeah.
wait, one last. So you
Yeah,
texture
sure.
in Photoshop primarily?
Yeah, I texture primarily in Photoshop. I'd say 90% of the time I'm working in Photoshop.
When you're not using that, what else do you use? Does anyone on your team use Substance Suite at all, or no?
There's a few people that have toyed around with some Substance. Yeah, I personally don't. But I'd say I use Photoshop and 3D Coat the most.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I think just to jump in there on that too, one of the things that the team has is a good amount of creative ownership and like flexibility. We actually have artists that use a number of 3D packages.
ZBrush,
Everything from
yeah.
Maya, ZBrush, Blender. It's really up to the artist, and as long as they can get it in WoW, and as long as it looks like WoW and kind of fits in the world, that's really the most important thing. We don't really care how you get there, just that the art matches that
As long as it's awesome.
Okay, that's really cool. All right.
Yeah.
Thank
Great
you.
question. We have another one?
Hi. It's a really popular question, and I guess it's kind of addressed to all of you. When you got hired, what did you have in your portfolio? How did you display it? And what stood out, and how did you lay it out? And all of those questions.
That's awesome. That's a great question. Matt, do you want to start that one?
Sure. So when I started, I was actually in college. I went to Laguna College of Art and Design, and I did the World of Warcraft art contest. So that was definitely a great way to get in. So with that, I displayed, something that really represented what World of Warcraft looks like. So something that could fit right into the game. So I think that's my best recommendation for starting. It's like, if you want to work on World of Warcraft, for example, like really have that thing that's World of Warcraft in your portfolio. It looks like it could go right into it.
How about you, Eric? What did you have in your portfolio? Or
Well, I actually, I come from a freelance illustration background, so I had a lot of 2D art, and as I was building up my portfolio, I was thinking of specifically what team I wanted to work on. And when I was working on props, I started building out pieces that were from very different kits and different variations of what those objects were. So I wouldn't want to have a portfolio that's completely only treasure chests, for example, because they would be like, oh, it's the treasure chest guy. Like, that's the only thing that they make. So having a wide kind of...
He's a little bitter about that because he was that guy for a long time.
I'm just a little, scarred. But, having a wide range like that is really, it's important because for us, it allows us to see where your creativity can expand to, and just like how you think about culture creation, and also, how you apply a certain aesthetic to an actual game asset.
cool. Thanks, sir. Cole, did you want to add anything to that? What your starting portfolio?
Yeah, for me, I always wanted to work here since I was like 12 years old. It's been my lifelong dream. And so I drew like Sammy's work all the time, and my portfolio in general was just all Warcraft stuff. So I'm one of the really lucky people that a recruiter just found me online and contacted me out of nowhere. And I remember flipping out and being like, oh my God, Blizzard's talking to me right now. And that was it. So my portfolio kind of consisted of a bunch of stuff. I did a lot of character work. I did a lot of just everything I could to try and get in the door. And for a long time, I was just a texture painter. So I painted textures on the team for, I think it was like 8 or 9 years. And they were like, hey, you like doing concepts. You want to do concepts? I was like, yes.
So I think to kind of summarize, because everyone's path's a little different, I think the one kind of through line is make it apparent what you want to do and showcase what you're interested in. and make it really apparent in your portfolio if it's props or characters, or visual development, that's really apparent, and also that you understand WoW and the Warcraft IP. I mean, with Matt's student art contest that he did the Draenei Ogre kind of half-breed, and I think when everyone saw it, it was like, oh my gosh, that seems like it can go in the game, but it also feels brand new. And so that's kind of what you're looking for, is not replicating something one-to-one that maybe someone on the team has already made, but also making something feel new and add something new to the game, and what you can bring as an artist. That's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Looks like we have another question over here.
Sorry. Hi, guys. This is a question for all three of you. My name is Zach Fisher, and I had a question about style kits. In Legion, there was kind of a strong emphasis on class fantasy in terms of the styles that were used. All of the classes got really, really specific class armors and ideas. And in BFA, we've strayed more towards environmental design. And the explanation was that kind of melding class fantasy and environment was just a little bit too kind of complex. And I wanted to ask you guys if it was something that you prefer working with one specific style kit in design, or if you like the challenge of blending multiple things like classes and environment together, or if it's just something that you prefer, just kind of a case-by-case basis.
You want to start that off, Cole?
So out of class fantasy, and then you're talking about environment armor designs. I tend to lean more towards the class fantasy. I love that's the reason I feel like you pick your class. If you pick a rogue or you pick a paladin, you should feel like a holy knight, or you should feel like a backstabby, Philistine. That's the way I lean, and sometimes it's good to break it up. But for me personally, I love class fantasy all the way. It should sell the feeling and the mood of that class.
Cool. Thanks, Cole. How about you, Matt? How do you balance that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good challenge to have the things that you can mix. So, I mean, there's that too. But I obviously love the class fantasy as well. Honestly, it's like everything of everything, pretty good. Just a lot of variety is good.
I think I know Eric's answer.
Class fantasy. No, I really like class fantasy too. Obviously, I mean, I completely nerd out about all things Paladin. So anytime I get a chance to work on anything, Paladin or Death Knight, I am totally there. And but even just the other things, like just building out the other cultures, even if it isn't specifically about a specific class or character in particular, you just find something that's really cool about it, and you just latch onto that, and then just grows from there. So I'd say it's really about finding something that really gets you jazzed, and then being able to focus on that kind of element to it, So, but in terms of the expansions from one to another, I think it's really cool to vary up some stuff from time to time. But obviously, whenever there's a chance to do some real hardcore, really fundamental Warcraft stuff that I personally really, really love, because I've been playing Warcraft since Orcs and Humans in 1994, and I just lose my mind. Yeah.
I'd say it's also a great question. Thank you. We have another question over here.
How do you get to be a better artist?
Oh my God.
Cole?
Yeah, Cole, how do we be a better artist?
Hold on, I'm recovering from the cuteness. It means it broke my brain. Literally the cutest voice.
Awesome costume, by the way.
Oh, amazing.
Great.
Just a lot of practice. That's it. Just work hard, and you'll get here. That's the best I can say. It's people talk a lot about talent and oh, you're so talented. I personally don't believe in talent. I think hard work is the way you get anywhere. So as long as you practice and you believe, I think you'll get here.
So when you're practicing, did you just do anatomy study after anatomy study, or did you kind of vary things up? Do you try to keep them, I guess, are you practicing to practice, or are you practicing for fun?
Both. I got basically every art book I could find. I was kind of self-taught a lot of my life. I couldn't afford to go to really nice art school. And there's so much online resource now. Like back in my day, there wasn't all the YouTubes and the Twitters. So you gotta go to like a library. It had like books and paper. And so I grabbed every art book I could find. Yeah, I know. Weird. So I just grabbed every art book I could find and just try to gather as much information as I could and just practice drawing as much as possible.
Awesome. Thanks, Cole. Oh, do you have a follow-up?
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Round of applause. A lot of courage. Come on now.
Chase your dreams.
Oh my
Looks
God.
like, do we have another question over there?
I have a. Oh, okay. I'll hold it. Okay. I have a question for three of you. Are you? I can see so many features on your drawing. I think majority came from experience or references.
Matt? Is that for Matt?
For three of you.
Oh, I can answer. Yeah, I mean, we definitely use reference as well as, our visual library within our heads. So it's definitely, a mix of that. Like, I might start the sketch and keep going, but definitely looking at reference can give you more ideas, more variety of things. Like, expanding your knowledge with reference is definitely a good idea. It's always looking at new things, and that can give you inspiration.
Do you take a sketchbook out and do reference studies?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sketching's always good, too.
Great question. Thanks. Looks like we have another question over here.
Hi, I was wondering what the top 3 art books. Sorry, it's really hard here. What are the top 3 art books that have taught you the most?
Top 3 art books that taught you the most. Eric.
Oh my God.
I know. There's so many.
Honestly, I mean, this sounds silly, but I grew up looking at like the Art of Warcraft books.
The manual?
Yeah, like watching, like copying manuals and things like that. Art books, like the more academic type. I like Andrew Loomis books. Any really good anatomy book that has both drawings and photo reference in is a good choice. Dynamic Hands is a really great book.
Bridgman, Loomis, the Gurney one's really good.
Yeah, James Gurney books. And every Art of Warcraft book that I can get my hands on.
All the manuals.
And literally just study like Sammy paintings and Metzen drawings and Wei Wang paintings. Like, I love all of it,
How about you, Cole? Do you have a favorite art book?
Again, there is just so many.
It's hard.
God, and you took all the good ones. Loomis, Bridgman for anatomy, stuff like that. Let's see, Anatomy for Artists is another great one. If you do, it's by. Frank Frazetta's Rough Work book is really awesome and inspiring to look at. Honestly, any artist book that really gets you jazzed and passionate about art is a good art book.
Great question. Hope that helps. Looks like we have another question over here.
I was wondering, because I have very shaky hands, so I was wondering if you guys have any tips about like working on line work and making it look kind of steady compared to messy and all over the place.
Confident line work. Matt?
Actually, things like the Photoshop tool right here, where you have the smoothing, can help a lot with that stuff. Like personally, I don't have like really clean line work. As you can see, it's pretty rough. So I mean, it really depends on what you're going for, but clean line work isn't always necessary, especially with this stuff. However, if that's what you're going for, there's definitely tools like on Photoshop where you can smooth the lines, so that really helps. So you can definitely do that.
So when you're, Eric, when you're doing sketches and paintings, are you drawing with your wrist or your elbow?
It depends on what I'm trying to do. Okay. Like if I'm getting really, really into tight detail work, it's more wrist. But if I'm just kind of painting large brush strokes, I would say, really tight, small details might be a struggle, right? So try to use more of your upper arm. And just try to be as intentional as possible about the strokes that you do make. That way you're following the form more and you're being a little bit more analytical about what you're painting, and hopefully that'll come through.
Great question, thanks. Looks like we have one over here.
Yes, I have a question for Eric or the boss. maybe, I am so impressed with all the work that's going into the prop illustration, but there are so many props in World of Warcraft.
Yes.
Do you spend this much time because it all has to be recreated in 3D, or do you sometimes jump right into 3D and model it out?
It kind of varies from artist to artist, to be honest. Like, there are people on my team that rarely do concepts. They just see it and then they go, and they have a really clear vision of what it's going to be. I would say I wouldn't take a concept to a fully finished, polished illustration most of the time. It tends to be really more rough for me, personally, because once I know what I'm doing and where I'm heading, the rest is just kind of fluff, and it's kind of like, I need to get this asset done, and I want to get started on it, because now I'm excited about where it's going to go. So it depends. Like, sometimes I'll get really, like I said, I come from an illustration background. I do sometimes, like, even on prop assets that aren't like a showpiece or a hero piece, it could just be something like a book, and I'm just really into the painting, so I might just spend a little extra time making a polished concept just for me, and also depending on if it's defining a kit, then having something that's more refined and more defined can be helpful for other artists that jump on after me. So
awesome. So, I play Paladin, so thank you for the hero pieces.
For the light, brother.
There are artists that do a lot of their visual development work through 3D, though. Like what our dungeon lead right now does all of his work through 3D for the most part, and then we'll do 2D after. It's kind of whatever your preference is, really. Again, it goes back to that creative freedom of being able to work with what works for you. So it's a great question. Yeah, over here.
Hey guys, question for all of you. What's your favorite traditional medium?
Ooh. Favorite traditional medium, Mr. Eastburn.
I like oils. Classic, just oils is one of my favorite traditional mediums. Pencil, graphite, runner-up. It's really neat. We just started getting these monthly like art kits, and it comes with its. This is another great thing about working on the team, and mad props to our team for treating us like so well. Is that it ships random art supplies to you every month. So like crayons might be one thing, and then we'll take like a day or half a day and do concepts just using the sketch utensils inside of these kits to help branch out different styles and keep us growing. So it's really, really awesome. So, but oils and graphite.
You guys are always trying new stuff. I mean, I see some of the sketches that Jimmy does with crayon and charcoal.
Highlighter.
Yeah. They're amazing. How about you, Matt? Do you have a favorite traditional media?
I would say oil painting is definitely my favorite. Aside from that, pencil and paper. Just doing sketches all the time with that stuff. So,
Eric, what about you?
Oils, like I said, I trained traditionally. I went to school for illustration and actually didn't do any digital until after I graduated. So I was purely oils, and even just the tactile quality of paint is really fun. And I really like charcoals. Working with charcoals, graphite on toned paper is a lot of fun. Do portraiture work, things like that. Yeah.
It's a great question. Thanks. Question over here?
Hello. So I wanted to ask a question for all three of you. What got you inspired into art? Was it just a hobby that each of you developed over time, or was there someone that inspired you to be an artist?
Matt, do you want to start that?
I've actually been drawing pretty much my whole life, from what I can remember. So I can't say what really inspired me to start drawing itself. However, like I've definitely been inspired by video games for forever. I mean, StarCraft was my first game, the Blizzard game that I was interested in, and I was a little kid at the time. So I definitely loved like all the artwork in that. So I draw that stuff all the time. Later on, we Warcraft stuff. So I mean, I guess video games in general have been a huge inspiration for artwork for me.
I think I know Cole's answer because I've seen the YouTube video. But you want to?
Yeah, the thing that got me into, I even remember the piece that got me into it. I wanted to be a paleontologist when I was a kid, so I drew dinosaurs, and then I started liking drawing after that. But the thing that made me that really set me on my path was when Warcraft 2 came out, Metzen did this image of an archer and a troll axe thrower jumping on top of him, and it was like the menu screen. And I remember seeing that as a kid, and it blew my mind, and I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. I want to do this. And then from that moment on, I wanted to work at this company. I wanted to do nothing but Warcraft artwork or
That's awesome.
or StarCraft artwork, Blizzard artwork, and that's what set me on my path.
How about you, Eric?
Cole stole my
first
drawing.
Inspiration. Same thing.
Stole my drawing. It's honestly, it is like one of those moments where seeing the drawings in the manual for Warcraft 2 really, like, I knew then that I wanted to work on this game. Like, I knew it then, which is, I feel so fortunate that it impacted me to that at that early of my life. But I've always, drawn. I think it's like when you're a kid and you're even kind of good at something and you get a little bit of positive reinforcement from your peers, or like for me, like my mom was super supportive when I was a kid. She, really show off to her friends and stuff. So at an early age, I had a lot of positive reinforcement for it, and I just kept up with it. And then it becomes something that you have to do. Like, it just feels like if you're not doing it, something's wrong. And I've just stuck with it since,
Cool. Thanks
All
for
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Another question over here?
Hi.
How's it going?
I have a question about when you're working on a new expansion, how do you go about developing the cultures for culture kits? And an example would be like Volpera, but you can talk about other kits.
Okay. So Cole's actually on the visual development team, and they're usually, we say, tip of the spear. You guys are usually in first. So how do you tackle that?
It really just depends. It varies a little bit, but for the most part, it's down to what is their story is the first thing that we start with. Who had the question, by the way? Over there? Okay. I'm always looking at the wrong person. Great question. Oh, you didn't ask it. Great. But no, so we start with the story and how they're supposed to feel is the number one important thing. So for Volpera, for instance, is like they're supposed to be like these nomadic, kind of like merchant, gypsy kind of culture. So we start there and then build out all the shapes in the shape language and stuff like that based on that.
Cool. Thanks. Great question. Question over here?
Hi. The themes from patch to patch and expansion to expansion vary a lot. Are there any over the last couple expansions or patches that have really stuck with you guys?
Favorite themes or
theming between them?
Favorite themes from expansion to expansion or patch to patch? Eric, I know the answer.
Anything Paladin or Death Knight.
There you go.
Man.
Thanks,
Anything.
Eric.
So
like,
biased.
The second Legion was in development, and they go, "Oh, we're doing order halls," and they were like, "Oh, we're doing class order halls." And I was like, "Yeah, Shotgun Paladin and Death Knight. I'm good."
Yeah.
So those were, super fun to work on, and any chance I get, I just latch onto it. So
it's as pro Paladin as Eric is. We also have a big team, and so we have a lot of people that pretty much identify like that with everything in the game. So we have pro hunter people as well. So don't feel like it's just Paladins.
I'm biased towards rogues.
Yeah.
So
Matt, what's really stuck out from patch to patch or expansion to expansion?
I've got to say the Moss stuff has been really awesome for me. I mean, just the whole domination armor kit, everything that was like Arthas is really cool. So definitely for that.
Matt's also a big fan of anything classic or really Warcraft based. So
yep. Orcs, dwarves, all that stuff.
How about you, Cole? What's been a fun one?
As long as it's anything to do with Warcraft, I usually have a lot of fun. But I do love just your typical grunt orc, just big heavy metal, like Frank Frazetta feeling, just a metal looking orc. Something that, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. Great question. Question over here?
Yeah, you guys all talked quite a bit about what your favorite video games inspired you coming up. So what were your favorite video games, and do they make their way into your art?
What were your favorite video games growing up? Do they make your way into the art? What were your influences, I guess, artistically from the video game world?
Video games? Growing up? You mean
kind of all over the
Warcraft?
place? Like, it's almost like it's many areas, right? Like,
I mean, I've always played video games growing up. Any kind of RPG is like totally at its core, like in my heart. Just any kind of like fantasy themed epic adventure type video game. As long as it feels like that's something that resonates with me. It'll find its way into my work. But it's not just video games, it's also books and movies and TV shows, Lord of the Rings, anything that's like that, like Tolkien.
It's that fantasy for you.
Yeah, he's like really resonates.
I think if you look at all three of their past work, their personal work that they do, it's all heavily based in Warcraft too. Great question. Thanks. Another one over here.
Hi. Has the increased popularity of cosplay had any impact on your design process? Like, for example, there's now a good chance that something you design might end up being worn by somebody, or they might attempt to recreate it. Does that have any bearing on like how big somebody's shoulder armor is or something?
Oh, do we take into account the foam weight of something?
Yeah.
Okay. Matt, do you work on armor sets and on the character team? So
yeah, I've definitely thought like it'd be really awesome if someone did that, but I never really consider like designing it to be for the cosplayers or something. I love seeing it. It's super cool. So when you do, it's awesome.
When you're designing the spikes on those shoulder pads, are you thinking how heavy are those going to be for someone walking around?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay, sorry. Great question.
Yeah. My wife's in fashion too, so it kind of does cross my mind quite a bit. I'm like, how would they wear this? Is it functional?
That's awesome.
It's fun to design that way.
It's got to make sense, I guess, right?
Totally.
I have a question over here, and I think we have time for about one more after that, maybe two.
Do you have any tips for color theory or color picking when you're working on something new, like a new mount that doesn't really have any relation to like some old kind of thing?
Color picking, are you talking about color harmony or?
Yeah, just like working on a palette that looks nice for something.
Okay. So Matt, you work on characters, you do armor sets, you do a lot of color variants. How do you think about color?
Yeah, it's definitely important. I mean, when we're designing for armor sets, different color variations or mounts, for example, we definitely want to have variations that fit within whatever it's supposed to be. So we're not going to make it, rainbow colored just for no reason. But, if it's like within a certain culture, we want to use those types of colors that they use in their materials. We don't want to stray too far from those things and keep it nice and consistent. So, as for picking the colors themselves, it really depends on what the culture is and things like that. So it can vary a lot.
Cool. Thanks. Great question. Looks like we have another question over here.
Yeah. This question's for Cole. I was curious about your process.
No more questions, please. No, just kidding.
Okay. Go ahead. Your process in how you bounce around the image. Like I've noticed, you'll get a texture brush and then you'll texture like one area, and you're like, all right, I'm kind of done with that, and then you'll move on to the side and then texture that area and then move. So what's your process in like working with the whole image versus just tight knitting one spot and then kind of gradually, going through it?
So for this one, it really depends on like what the task is. For this is supposed to be like a loose concept that kind of gives enough information for the team to move forward, right? So it's kind of like I need to bounce around. Also, I'm a little ADHD, but when you bounce around and work everything evenly, you can kind of take everything to a level finish that like the scythe is defined enough so I can do the scythe of this character. Oh, okay, the face is defined enough so I can do the face. If it was an illustration, sometimes the things I like to do for like pieces like this is define out like one specific area after I do my rough, and it gives me a level of detail that I'm shooting for in the rest of the piece. And also a bunch of values that I can color pick right here. So if I want to add anything else, I know what the shadow color is, I know what the light color is, and then I can just use that across the entire orc. So since I have my shadow color picked out like this, and I know what my light color is, if I wanted to block out a whole other segment of him, I could just do it really, really quick by just color selecting, block that in, and then, grab this, block in a shadow.
He's using the mouse the whole time.
This is mouse, by the way, yeah. I always paint with the mouse, too. I don't know what you guys do. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Funny story, Jimmy Lowe, my lead, did his entire
texture test
with mouse. And I was like, what?
It's only because he's Jimmy Lowe.
The guy's a demon. He is.
So, Cole, that's a great question, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cole, I noticed with your orc that you had up, you went in and went super detailed even on the mouth area. Like seeing saliva and stuff like that. Are you going to take this image that you're working on right now? Are you going to take it to that level, or?
No. This one's going to stay around this level. Okay. If they want me to take it to that level, I totally will.
Okay, cool. So we've got a few minutes left. Artists, if you want to pull up some final images of your work, maybe you've done in the past, and if you have any right now, and then I'll come around and just kind of gather your final thoughts. You can give a few final thoughts on that. Matt, you seem like you've got some. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this is an example of a concept I did for Lorthamar. For this one, he's got a lot more detail than a lot of other concepts do. But for this one, it was like really important to sell this character, really important character, and show what his material's like, what his color's like, what he's going to actually look like in the game, so everyone has a good idea of what the final product's going to end up being.
Cool. So not everything is going to be at that fully rendered out level.
Sometimes a little rougher, but usually
looser.
just to get the idea down.
I've seen even like sometimes you'll do one side, maybe like a left arm, and you won't do the right arm will be in shadow and not as described.
Right.
You're finding that balance sometimes?
Yep.
Okay.
Definitely.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Eric, do you want to pull up some final work and talk about it?
Sure. So I mentioned earlier that sometimes I don't take an asset to a fully finished painted piece, but here's an example of a shrine prop that I had made for Shadowlands, which some of you might have seen in Bastion. And I also wanted to show what we also sometimes do, which is kind of play around with what the animation for this prop might be like, what the effects might be like, and how that transition happens. And I have a little image of showing that process in play.
And so you're handling all this yourself as a prop artist?
This was completely hand animated by me, and the effects grabbed a lot of stuff from our amazing effects team and just tweaked some things here and there to fit my needs and fit for the prop that I was making. And it's just, grabbing work from our teammates and making something awesome.
So going back to your previous image of that, your concepts, are you doing these beforehand, taking them?
Yes. Yeah. This is just like I wanted to think through how that animation process was going to go when I was making this prop. And when I was texturing it, I was just referencing elements from the kit that the dungeon team had been making.
So, because you're working off something established.
Yes.
Okay. Putting it sort of all together.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Oh, do you want to talk about that?
This is just a final kind of rendering of the book. Some of you might have seen me jumping around, like forward in time and some of the steps. But this is roughly around what I would consider like a final for me, where I was like happy with where I had all the things defined before I actually jumped into modeling it.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
And lastly, Cole, you want to pull up some final images and talk about them?
Yeah, so this is the process that I just did, which is the loose thumbnail right here, into just like a sketch, a little more defined, into a little bit of value, a little bit of lighting for mood, and then a little bit of color. And then I take that even further if the team wants me to take that further, really define maybe for the effects team, like what this effect looks like and that kind of thing. And then somebody had a class fantasy question, and yeah, I like class fantasy, so that's that's what that's about. Yeah.
So with that image, that would pretty much be done at that point?
Yeah. Also, it's up to my art director. If he says it's not done, then it's not done.
Okay. Work with them. Okay. That's cool. And then would you pass that off to another team, or how does that work?
Yes. Send it over to the design team so the design team can start putting together story or something, whatever they want to do, like maybe play mechanics around it. Like this, guy could have a site that does, a dot of DPS over time, and the same thing for the effects team. They get it and they look at it and say, what can we do for that effect? That kind of thing.
Cool. Also want to let everyone know that if you're joining us in person, afterwards, the artist will be over to the right of the stage. If you want to talk to them any further, have any more questions, they'd be happy to talk with you over there. And also that our 9th annual Student Art Contest is live now. There's details online about that if you have interest in that. And please give the artist a round of applause, and hope everyone has a great rest of your BlizzCon. Thanks.
Thank you for attending Artists at Work, World of Warcraft. Up next, Blizzard Art Studio, Sir Finley Mergelton.